Welcome back to the Convo Couch, ladies and gentlemen. I am Pasta Jardula, and of course we have Johnny Sue on the ones and twos. And happy Saturday to all. I'm glad you can all tune on in, and we want to remind you to like, share, subscribe to our channel. We're having a hard time with YouTube right now, but you out there, yes, you guys have been keeping us alive, fulfilling us with a lot of subscriptions, a lovely Patreon that's been growing, and we want to thank you for that. And today we're just going to talk about some great stuff in lieu of Jimmy Dore. He's off today, so you're stuck with us, ladies and gentlemen. You ain't got Jimmy, but you got a lot of pasta, and of course, Johnny. So let's just jump right back into it today. I wanted to talk about Bernie Sanders and the danger of him losing the Libertarian vote, because last election in 2016, I think a lot of us looked at the possibilities of the independents and the Libertarian votes that Bernie Sanders could have got that Hillary Clinton would never have gotten. Now, a lot of people thought that Donald Trump, he had this kind of rhetoric that he was kind of sewing up the Libertarians by talking about these wasteful wars that Obama started. He liked to always hit on Obama, but true enough, Obama did start a lot of wars. So, if you think for a second that the progressives, should be cozying up with the neoliberal centrists to unite and defeat Donald Trump, you might be wrong. Granted, there are people on the left that will never vote for Donald Trump. I know that, but that is vice versa on the right. There are people on the right that will never, ever vote for Bernie Sanders. So in the next election, if it does come down to Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, it's key to get those independents and, more importantly, the libertarians. The libertarians, there's a big group of them, and they will vote. A lot of them didn't vote last time. They didn't think Gary Johnson had a chance. They didn't think that Trump would be as libertarian-minded as possible when it came to certain areas, and we're going to talk about that. And now, don't get me wrong. Progressives and libertarians will never agree on certain things. They will never agree on Medicare for all. Libertarians are not for that. Progressives are. They'll never agree on an assault weapons ban. Progressives are for that deeply. Libertarians are not, and they'll never agree on climate change. One of the areas where the Koch brothers were so pointed at, the fact that we're drill baby drill mentality. However, true libertarians and true progressives will agree on three core issues. And if you don't believe me, just watch Ron Paul here. He talks about the bond, the inner core issues where progressives and libertarians unite. Take a look.
She's good on her feet, and she knows the issue. And of course, a good progressive Democrat will agree a lot with a libertarian, on civil liberties and on foreign policy. We have to work at it to get along with people who want more economic interventionism. But I found that not too difficult, because I worked a lot with Dennis Kucinich and other progressives.
There you go. So you can see right there, that's Ron Paul talking about it right there. He's worked with Dennis Kucinich, super progressive. We love Dennis Kucinich. Dennis Kucinich ran before Bernie. He didn't catch fire like Bernie, but he had a lot of those progressive values. And he worked a lot with Ron Paul, because there are three major issues, like I said, where these progressives and these libertarians get along. Number one is anti-war, mainly because progressives are emotionally invested and we're very compassionate. We don't want to see bombs dropping all over the place. And libertarians tend to always point out the fact that it's costly. It costs a lot of money. And they also hate this word they talk about. Libertarians talk about it all the time. It's called blowback, and we'll get to that. The other two areas are civil liberties, where they're spying on us and suppressing our speech. Libertarians and progressives alike hate that stuff. So what's going on with Google right now? They hate it. Jailing of Julian Assange, they hate it. Also, the third issue, it was when it comes to the tax code and auditing the Fed. Now, they're not going to agree completely on auditing the tax code, but they hate loopholes. They hate subsidies. I know you've heard Bernie Sanders talk about loopholes and subsidies, the way these companies like Amazon, even though they're set to pay a certain percentage, pay absolutely nothing because of all these loopholes. But today we're going to concentrate on the biggest area, and that is foreign policy, because libertarians are not completely happy with Donald Trump. I mean, yes, he has not started any new wars, and I think they appreciate that, but he's been somewhat of a sanctions aficionado, and libertarians don't like that. They don't want the blowback. They don't want to put their boot on the throat of these companies. And one of the reasons why they hate all this stuff in this intervention is they hate the word blowback. I'm going to put that up there because blowback, the definition is an unforeseen and unwanted effect, a result, or a set of repercussions. So these libertarians understand that the meddling could come back to haunt us. Remember what they said in Bobby Boucher when his mama said, those chickens is coming home to roost, Bobby. Well, the chickens will come home to roost. And it's just a fact. The way we intervened in Syria, where we funded al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, the chickens are going to come back to roost because it's caused a serious problem. And they know who caused that problem. And they point the fingers right to the United States. Someone told me from Iran the other day, he goes to school in Britain, and I don't want to mention his name because he wants to stay anonymous, but he said the worst thing that the United States could do is enact these sanctions because it unites the country. There's already a divide, a wedge between the old theocrats in Iran and the younger generation who actually don't like the theocrats. But as soon as we impose these sanctions, they stop looking at each other and they look right at us. And the libertarians know this. And once again, Bernie Sanders has not been awful. He's been better than most. Has he been as good as Tulsi Gabbard? Hell no. And we're going to discuss that. But even though he's been decent, this is a definite area of concern because of who Bernie Sanders has now surrounded himself with. So let's talk about these areas of foreign policy which have gotten me very, very nervous. And the one biggest one right off the bat is this alarming notion of RussiaGate. Let's take a look at Bernie Sanders here on the Senate floor talking about RussiaGate.
Trump derangement syndrome has officially come to the Senate.
Does anybody doubt the truth? The Congress must make it clear that we accept the assessment of our intelligence community with regard to Russian election interfering in our country and in other democracies. The Congress must move aggressively to protect our election system from interference by Russia or any foreign power. Does anybody deny the importance of that? The Congress must demand that the sanctions against Russia be fully implemented. The Congress must make it clear that we will not accept any interference with the ongoing investigation of Special Counsel Mueller, and that the President must cooperate with this investigation.
The hatred for the president is so intense that partisans would rather risk war than give diplomacy a chance. Bringing the hatred of the president to the Senate.
Okay, it says that Ron Paul didn't get it. You know what? Progressives who think that this rhetoric is okay, you don't get it. Okay, this is one of the major superpowers in the world. If you're sitting there and accusing them of election meddling, which there's been zero evidence, zero proof, and you won't hold your own party accountable, what traction are you going to really make? This is a big turnoff to libertarians and progressives out there who hate this Russian narrative, okay, because they know where it started. They know it started with John Podesta, and rather admit that they lost the election themselves, the Democrat, they want to point the finger at Russia. And it's just really, really hurting Bernie Sanders. There's been tweet after tweet. He's still carrying this. The other day, I think even George Galloway said, Bernie, this is embarrassing when it came to this RussiaGate narrative. So really, if he continues to talk like this, it's just going to be more damaging. And this is a big no-no for the libertarians. So let's turn our attention to the next country, because I don't want to harp on RussiaGate because it's out there. You know about it. We talked about it. But let's talk about our foreign policy concerns when it comes to Venezuela. Because once again, Bernie hasn't been awful on this at all, but he hasn't been great. He hasn't been good enough. And even though the neocons and the neoliberals both unite when it comes to Venezuela and their attitude towards Maduro and whatnot, libertarians, true progressives want hands off. No regime change, no blowback. However, Bernie's foreign policy team, they stink at Latin America. They stink at South and Central America. They really do. And I'm going to go on to prove that and show you. But it seems that they're directing Bernie Sanders to stay away from standing up for Venezuela, the elections, and talk against the sanctions because they think it will kind of make Bernie look like he's too pro-socialist. And they're still trying to hide that word and walk away from the fact that he is a democratic socialist. And sooner or later, Bernie Sanders is going to have to own it. I think they would have been better trying to attack it head on rather than try to stay away from it. Let's take a look at some of Bernie's tweets, which once again are very, very upsetting because they somewhat manufacture consent. Take a look. It says, Bernie Sanders, the Maduro government has waged a violent crackdown on Venezuelan civil society. violated the Constitution by dissolving the National Assembly, and was reelected last year in the election many observers said was fraudulent. Okay, right off the bat, the economy is a disaster and millions are migrating. The United States should support the rule of law, fair elections, and self-determination for the Venezuelan people. We must condemn the use of violence against unarmed protesters and the suppression of dissent. But we must learn from the lessons of the past and not be in the business of regime change and supporting coups as we have in Chile, Guatemala, Brazil, and the DR. The U.S. has a long history of inappropriately intervening in Latin American nations. We must not go down that road again. So now, once again, I love the way he finished with this statement. He talked about a regime change, but it seems like he's somewhat manufacturing consent with his attitude in the beginning. He talks about the Maduro government and not having a fair elections. These elections were said to be some of the fairest in the world. The Jimmy Carter Institute went in there and said these elections are the best. And they've done it twice. These elections have been overseen. Max Blumenthal has done some amazing reporting on that. And then he talks about the National Assembly and what they did and their fugazi moves. Now, there might be some inner dispute, but when you're sitting there and you're siding with the National Assembly, you're sitting there and you're siding with Guaido. Okay? He's also not mentioning the fact that we've had sanctions on this country for years. The sanctions have been the most harmful to Venezuela than anything else. Our involvement. We can pull those sanctions today. We just robbed them of their gold. So, once again, Bernie Sanders seems to have 1 foot in, 1 foot out when it comes to this. And also, take a look. We have a clip here at Bernie Sanders at the debate talking about what the problem is. That's the Sanders clip 1. So check this clip out real quick once again. And I was a little bit disappointed when I saw this.
Just said. And that is, on day one, we take out our executive order pen and we rescind every damn thing on this issue that Trump has done. Number two, picking up on the point that Joe made, we got to look at the root causes. And you have a situation where Honduras, among other things, is a failing state, massive corruption. You got gangs who are telling families that if a 10-year-old does not join that gang, that family is going to be killed. What we have got to do on day one is invite the presidents and the leadership of Central America and Mexico together. This is a hemispheric problem that we have got to address.
Okay. The problem for me right there is what he said at the end. It's a hemispheric problem. No, it's not. And libertarians and independents, they know this. This is American imperialistic problem. We keep on intervening. We keep on putting these sanctions on these countries. This is our fault. If we would just try to lift the sanctions today, a lot of things would be a lot better. Okay, we're stealing their gold. And take a look at Marianne Williamson, because she on that stage, she was able to hit it. Watch what she says. Marianne Williamson, clip 2.
Remember, and I have great respect for everyone who is on this stage, but we're going to talk about what to do about health care. Well, where have you been, guys? Because if it's not just a matter of a plan, and I haven't heard anybody on this stage who has talked about American foreign policy in Latin America and how we might have, in the last few decades, contributed to something being more.
Senator Gillibrand.
Okay, thank you, Marianne Williamson. That was the response we wanted. Okay, even Tulsi Gabbard made a tweet a long time ago, and I should have had it up. I'm sorry I don't. But she talked and connected dots. And what Marianne Williamson did on the stage there, I don't know if you saw me. I had the sign up. I was thumbs up. I was so happy because she connected the dot. We have to talk about our intervention and how it affects these countries. Okay, if you're a Trump supporter and you want a wall because there's so much influx of immigration coming this way, you have to look at the main cause of the problem. And that's our intervention. We also gave $41 million, I believe, to the Guaido government. Just gave it to them. Just recently. So a lot of crap's going on. And the whole thing about it is that these sanctions affect the poor. Do we have an article? It said how the sanctions affect the poor. The BBC World Latin America. U.S. sanctions may worsen Venezuelan suffering, says UN rights chief. We're actually inflicting human rights suffering. Us. United States of America. And the libertarians know this. They use these companies like the NED, the NGOs, and they funnel all money into the opposition to cause chaos. Why? So we can cause a mass set of confusion, go in and take the oil ourselves. We want the natural resources. Also, we have some breaking news in. We heard there might be a problem with Venezuela and the Russians. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, Jack Ryan will save us. Take a quick look at the beginning of this
world
trailer.
stage. Venezuela is the single greatest resource of oil on the planet. So, why is this country in the midst of one of the greatest humanitarian crises in history?
Presidente Reyes los ha traicionado a todos.
Your concern is that the Russians are secretly selling weapons to Venezuela?
It would fit a pattern.
This ends up in the news, it's just going to cause panic.
And in nuclear Venezuela, you will not hear about in the news because we'll already be dead.
Okay, I don't want him to silence our stream over here. But do you like that? Remember we talk about the propaganda arm of the deep state? You know what I hear? Hollywood. It's in. I no longer will watch The Office. John Krasinski, you broke my heart. And this is just pure propaganda. You see what I'm saying over here? That's why we need voices who said hands off Venezuela unequivocally. Unequivocally. They're manufacturing consent. They're putting in our minds of our children that Venezuela is in cahoots with the Russians and we must go in there before they cause a nuclear weapon. Don't just say it's just a video or a movie or anything else. It's bad. It's programming. So Venezuela is a problem. RussiaGate's a problem. Here's the next problem right now. And once again, not awful, but not good. And that is Bernie's stance on China, well, a la Hong Kong. Take a look at Bernie's tweet over here right now, what he puts up about the Hong Kong protesters. I just want to take a quick look at this. And it says, plain and simple, the demonstrations in Hong Kong are an inspiration to us all. It is the right of all people to protest for a better future. We stand with these brave protesters and call on the Chinese government to refrain from violence. Now, listen, anybody wants to get out there, they want to protest, of course. We agree. We love it. You want to stand up for human rights? Of course. Are there issues in China with human rights? Of course. Nobody's denying that. Did you want to say something, Johnny? No, okay, I'm sorry. Nobody's denying that. But we got to understand that we cannot be involved in any way, shape, or form. And if you look at the Ron Paul Institute, and I keep on saying Ron Paul because he is the mecca when it comes to libertarians, the Ron Paul Institute. Look at the influence we have here. The Mint Press puts out, plain and simple, the American influence. American government, NGOs fuel and fund Hong Kong anti-extradition protest. The Gray Zone, one of our favorite people that we're following, Max Blumenthal. It says, behind a made-for-TV Hong Kong protest narrative, Washington is backing. Okay? So you see that Washington is involved. And once again, we don't want to say that the Chinese or the Hong Kong protesters, can't stand up and protest. But at no way, shape, or form should we be putting gasoline on it. Bernie must say, and he should say, and this will win over a lot of libertarians. And some people were putting on the feed. I said, why would a libertarian vote for Bernie at this time? You're right, because he's not making these great decisions. The United States should not be involved financially or military in Hong Kong in any way, shape whatsoever. That is the answer we need from Bernie Sanders. Sorry if you out there's got a better Bernie than me, but we want him to talk to these foreign leaders. And taking shots at like heads of state like Xi Jinping by calling his government authoritarian doesn't help. Take a look at this small clip of Bernie Sanders talking about Xi Jinping, well, the Chinese government as a whole, and what they're all about.
China is a country that is moving, unfortunately, in a more authoritarian way in a number of directions. But what we have to say about China, in fairness to China and its leadership, is, if I'm not mistaken, they have made more progress in addressing extreme poverty than any country in the history of civilization.
Bad
okay.
Bernie.
So I want to say 1 second. I do appreciate the fact that he finally mentioned the fact that they're moving people out of poverty. China is one of those countries, along with another country we'll talk about soon, that is moving their citizens out of poverty. Are there authoritarian ways there? Yes, of course. But once again, the manufacturing of consent to be able to go and look at China as a geopolitical adversary. And he said this before, China is not my enemy. But then he seems to do, that whole dance of 2 steps forward, 1 step back when he talks about that. How are you going to go and talk to Xi Jinping when you sit there and you're calling his government authoritarian? You know, you want to tread lightly because we want Bernie Sanders to go talk to these people. And
there is censorship going on in China, though, right?
Of course. Listen, you can only have one baby in China, mainland China.
Yeah.
You can't organize and talk out against the government. Now, don't get me wrong. You could be sitting in your house and talk.
It's pretty authoritarian, though, right?
It's authoritarian. Yeah. I mean, we're all authoritarian as far as I'm concerned because, we're chained down to other things. There's other ways. We can go out and say what we want to say, but are we really free? We don't have our health care. We don't have our medicine. We don't have our living situation. Remember, here's something to think about, Johnny. In 2 years, 76% of China's urban population will be in the middle class. In 2 years, 45% of Americans will be in the middle class. We're moving a higher our citizens are moving closer into poverty, and they're almost wiped it out. Now, once again, I don't want to sit there and say that this is the best government whatsoever, but you have to be ahead of these things. No matter what, you can speak out against it as long as you're saying, first off, guys, and the Ron Paul Institute, you put it up right here, it says you cannot be involved financially. And I have this great article, and it says right there, what's the cover say for me, Johnny? Because I got my, it says, problems arise with Washington's latest color revolution in Hong Kong. And this is dated in June 28th. Now, I caught up a little section right here, and I want to talk about the U.S. color revolution masquerades as a popular opposition. And it says, unable to defeat the bill legislatively, Hong Kong's pro-Western opposition has taken to the streets with the help of Western media's spin. The illusion of popular opposition to the extradition bill and Beijing's growing influence over Hong Kong is created. What is not omitted, but actively denied, is the fact that the opposition's core leaders, parties, organizations, and the media operations are all tied directly to Washington, D.C. via the National Endowment for Democracy, the NED, which you've heard of talk about many times on the show, and corporate foundations like the Open Society Foundation. Hong Kong opposition has already long been exposed as U.S.-sponsored. Okay? And the next article I put up, they admitted it. All you have to do is follow the money. Progressives were really great at following the money when it came to campaign contributions and where these people are coming from. But we've been a little bit light on following the money when it comes to war. You can see it says now admits the funding for Occupy Central and Hong Kong. They admitted it. They got caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Okay? Why is this important now too as well? Because you got to understand what's going on. The military-industrial complex, they need another enemy. Just like they did in 91. They were losing their enemies. They had to create more adversaries. So what's going on now? I put it right here. It says, why is it so important? Because now the U.S. Navy is, guess where they're moving? They're moving into the South China Sea. They're going into their area. They're going into their territory. This is what they do. They fuel these protests to make it look public image like there's some serious shenanigans going on in China, and then they start moving in militarily-wise. Now we start moving aircraft carriers in there. Now we need more weapons. Now China is the enemy. We got to get into their neighborhood now. You understand how it's all tied? These little protests that you think that Bernie Sanders might be sticking up for these people democracy-wise, it's not true. He might, in some ways, seem like that way, but he's not pointing out the fact that we are backdoor funding these things. Libertarians and independents know that, and that's why they have a problem with this. Finally, let's get to the last point, which is Kashmir, because once again, here's Bernie at the Islamic Society for the North American Convention. Take a look at Bernie, what he says right here when it comes to Kashmir. You don't have it. I put it in there. Yeah, right there. So this is Bernie once again just talking at a convention. We played it at the show the other day, so check this out.
I am also deeply concerned about the situation in Kashmir. Where the Indian government has revoked Kashmiri autonomy, cracked down on dissent, and instituted a communications blackout. The crackdown in the name of security is also denying the Kashmiri people access to medical care. Even many respected doctors in India have acknowledged that the Indian government imposed restrictions on travel are threatening the life-saving care that patients need. India's action is unacceptable. The communications blockade must be lifted immediately. And the United States government must speak out boldly in support of international humanitarian law and in support of a UN-backed peaceful resolution that respects the will of the Kashmiri people.
Okay. So before I get my opinions into this, I just really wanted to share Niko House's opinions on this because we talked about this the other day. Bernie Sanders just calling out one side without even speaking to the other side, without even meeting with Modi and seeing what's going on, is cause for concern. Here's Niko House speaking about it. Here you go, Niko.
So the problem with Bernie speaking out in the way that he did about the Kashmir situation is that he's running for president, right? He's running to be commander-in-chief. And do you put yourself in a good position while you're, as a negotiator, if you're attacking an Indian government or not even, you're only attacking one government, but not actually calling out Pakistan. And, I literally just saw a video where the Prime Minister, Khan of Pakistan, is actually calling out the terrorist organizations that we propped up there and how they attack people in Pakistan and in Kashmir. So, we're only talking about Modi in India, but not talking about the year and a half of straight terrorism that Kashmir has spent that sparked this entire controversy to begin with. Now, because you're only calling out one side and you're speaking based off it's kind of a reactionary statement, you're taking away your ability to negotiate in good faith. Because why would I, as a leader, want to negotiate with you? If the first thing you did was attack, you didn't reach out to me trying to understand what's going on. You haven't talked to people in my government. You haven't asked both sides. If you're the president, you're supposed to listen, because Pakistan is technically our ally. India is kind of an economic ally. We go back and forth with them. But Modi is what we would consider, policy-wise, he would be considered a populist candidate. So, we don't really like populists. Like, he has given free health care and bringing public bathrooms and cleaning up the rivers and things like that, public banking. So we don't like people like that. And so, of course, when you only hear one side of the story, you should always ask, well, what about the other side of the story? And I think that Bernie is doing a disservice to himself if he wins, if he comes out the gate just attacking rather than trying to understand what's happening so that we can stop it from happening.
So you can see what Bernie said, what Niko said about Bernie, and I kind of share that sentiment because when you don't speak to one side and you just make an opinion, you start saying, to yourself, well, who's influencing Bernie? Now, look at the article I put up here real quick. It says Bernie Sanders' Kashmir remark. Was Bernie Sanders' Kashmir remark influenced by his Pakistani-American campaign manager? Which a lot of people are saying that Fayez, who is his campaign leader, campaign manager, has influenced him in the wrong way. Because Modi is the head of a country of over 1 billion people. And he's meeting with Putin right now as we speak, another world leader. They've escalated themselves. You don't burn bridges without speaking to both sides. Just because a small group of people, in this particular case, these social justice warriors or these establishment Democrats that are using this term Hindu nationalism and saying that, everybody needs to condemn Modi, that doesn't fly with independents and libertarians. They want peace. They want us talking to a head of state. And just like Niko talked about all these statistics, which Modi did, when he helped sanitation, I think it was under 40% of Indians had a toilet before Modi. Now 99% of Indians have a toilet. Can you imagine going one day without a toilet? You know what I'm saying? And then, he got bank accounts for hundreds of thousands of Indians and plugged them into the system. And I don't want to sit here and defend Modi, but no matter what, he's the head of a state, and we have to have good relations. We can always speak out against stuff, but if we just take one side unequivocally without speaking to both leaders, it's a disaster for diplomacy down the road. You hear what I'm saying? So let's talk about why this is going on, because I happen to say that, Bernie Sanders used to get foreign policy advice from Tulsi Gabbard, but he no longer does. Tulsi Gabbard is the clear-cut choice for libertarians. We played that Ron Paul video the other day, and he unequivocally says that she's the only one. She stands out. She understands foreign policy. But Bernie Sanders is now getting a lot of foreign policy advice from a 46-year-old man, that's how old I am, Matt Duss. And how does he feel about Tulsi Gabbard? Well, here's a little tweet we found over there. He didn't tweet it himself, but he liked this tweet. And it says, 2 things make Bernie Sanders' presidential run a very positive development in foreign policy terms. 1, the toxic Tulsi Gabbard is no longer part of his orbit. And with Matt Duss, he will be getting foreign policy advice from another Democratic candidate currently running. Now, the big problem with that is Matt Duss doesn't have a lot of experience in South and Central America. Here is the articles he wrote when he wrote for the Washington Post. All of them are about Israel, about Middle East. There are none here about South and Central America. If you go down, I think you can click on a link too as well. There's even more. You'll find me one where he talks about South and Central America. He doesn't. And I know he's had a lot of experience with dealing with the Yemen situation where Ro Khanna praised him. He has this stance, I think, that is very popular with a lot of Bernie Sanders followers where he is not completely anti-Israel at all, but he does keep them at a distance and tries to call them for what they feel the atrocities are. So he has this kind of like standoffish with Israel. However, when it comes to South and Central America, nada. And guess what? This is Matthew Duss. Guess who he used to work for? It says that he served from 2008 to 2014. He was a national security and international policy analyst at the Center for American Progress. That's right. He was Neera Tanda's employee at the Center for American Progress. And guess what? Bernie's campaign manager also worked for Neera Tanden right there. Fayez Shakir worked for the Center for American Progress as well. Sorry about that, Johnny. I slipped that in there late, guys. Johnny's why I call him on the ones and twos. What he just did right there just shows it. He's one of those guys who can transform and mix a song at the same time. He went in there, cut it up, and put it in there. But this is a serious problem, okay, because these guys have the inability to think outside the Democratic bubble. And it will cost Bernie this election if it continues to go on. It's a very, very big cause for concern. We should be calling for Matt Duss's head right now. I don't think he deserves to be Bernie's foreign policy advisor. Bernie's foreign policy keeps drifting further and further away. Ladies and gentlemen, if we don't get outside of this Democratic bubble when it comes to Bernie Sanders elections, he will lose if he faces Donald Trump. Okay? You have to think big picture, the whole bubble, the whole picture. Who's voting in these elections? The independents and the libertarians, they don't want this shit anymore. They don't want adversaries. This stance that this campaign is taking is killing Bernie Sanders. Him talking about Kashmir right there, you saw that article. They were like, wait, who influenced this and why didn't he talk to both sides? Donald Trump even came out and said, Modi's got it. That's what the libertarians want to hear. It might be right, it might be wrong, but we don't want to intervene anymore. What moral high ground does America have to intervene in these problems anymore? And the fact that it's not called out as our intervention when it comes to, forget about Russia. Let's put Russia aside. Venezuela, we're intervening. I think we have a super chat, and we have to talk about this. It said from Charles Pereira, who's on the MCSC network, watching live on the YouTube, an Indian view on Kashmir is like an Israeli view on Palestine. Sorry, but y'all are spreading misinfo about Kashmir without knowing it to defend Tulsi. Thank you, Charles. But you also had another super tweet where he talked about the white helmets, right? Somebody talked about the white helmets. Somebody talked about Venezuela.
So
go ahead.
Here's the thing. Just to be fair, Bernie's always been like anti-war throughout his entire career. He's always voted correctly. And I think really this is just he's changed since the last election.
Yeah.
And I believe it's part of a strategy that whatever his campaign, whatever they're doing it, and I think it's a bad strategy.
Yeah.
They're trying to appeal to centrists. he should just be Savage Bernie again.
Yeah.
He should be the Savage Bernie that we remember, that we know, that we fell in love with, 2016, 2015. And he's trying to distance himself from Tulsi because that's kind of the role that she's taken right now. Mm-hmm. She's kind of the savage person right now. But I don't think it's working. And also there's been a lot of, the reality is that there's been a lot of establishment people that have infiltrated his campaign.
Yep. You've been around now. This is like you just moved to California recently, and I think it's been a shock that you've been seeing when you're going out in this campaign trail. You're seeing these people who are so tied to the establishment, and they have this same kind of like anti-Trump, no matter what kind of mentality, and they're really not hitting the issues that some of us like.
Right. I feel like they're pushing Bernie to always to mention the anti-Trump thing. You know, I mean, it appeals to centrists, but like, are at the end of the day, are those centrists going to go and vote for Bernie?
I think it appeals more to neoliberals than centrists too. I think people are saying the neoliberals are the centrists. There's a lot of centrists who are kind of libertarian who don't like these policies. And referring to Charles Pereira, who left the super chat, I know what you're saying, man, but it doesn't make a difference. He's still got to go talk to both sides. You don't make a comment without talking to both sides.
It was a strong statement for Bernie to make. It was a very strong statement.
Yes, without talking to Modi.
I haven't seen anyone else make a statement like that.
Yeah.
I
mean, so I understand what you're saying, that we have this kind of Israeli point of view. No, when it comes to Israeli and Palestine, we're all in it. We're funding. Our money's there. Our weapons there. Big different situation, Mr. Charles. When it comes to India and Pakistan, we ain't funding nothing. We're not doing anything. And I understand what you're saying, that there could be some atrocities, but we spoke to people in Kashmir who left us messages. We can't share them because I don't want them shared, but they said they wanted that curfew. They wanted that lockdown, that it protected them from the threats that came at night. So when he goes security and just doing that without talking to Modi, no good. I understand that, and I said this, India might be wrong. Modi might be wrong, but you don't make statements without talking to both sides, Charles.
The facts are, though, that India is moving into this controversial territory that's supposed to be both half Pakistan, half India, and so they're kind of like doing eminent domain of that area.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a good thing, you know, if there's a lot of terrorists there and they're kind of trying to crack down on the terrorists, then that's great. But if there's human right violations, we have to look into that.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Absolutely. And my point is, too, as well, John, and Johnny, that's a great way, intimate domain. That's how they're trying to use it and stuff, because they believe that area is theirs. And, you know, there's also some, you know, there are people who talked about this, too, as well, with the laws that were lifted that didn't protect, 370 didn't protect Kashmiri women, too. And I was looking through a lot of it, too. It's very confusing. But, I mean, there's just more to it than this. And then you have to just go talk to both sides. That's my only argument. You just talk to both sides. He shouldn't have said anything without talking to India or Modi. He could have made a call. Modi would have talked to them if he wanted to. The government would have made a statement. Talk to both sides. We want diplomacy and peace. And once again, it is a different situation because we're not involved. Israel and Palestine are involved financially, military-wise.
Yeah.
This situation, stay the F out. That's just my personal opinion. You can call on the UN and whatnot, but when you say things like security, that really looks bad. And it's we want you to go talk to Modi. We want you to talk to Xi Jinping. Okay? If you're going to be the leader of the free world, we want peace. So that is my thoughts. That is my opinions. Johnny, we got any questions you want to bring up or anything like that?
Just the last thing, and I'm not sure, like, you know, I don't know if Bernie does his own research. I'm sure his foreign policy advisor tells him what's going on in the world. So maybe his foreign policy advisor is withholding information, such as Guaido being a paid opposition or whatever, supported by, you know, that's why he hasn't said anything about Venezuela, you know?
Yeah.
Or like, you know, he's kind of he needs to mention the sanctions, though, you know?
Of course. We've said that, right?
Yes.
We talked about these sanctions, how these sanctions kill. Not enough people listen to Matt. They're shutting doors on him when they should be listening to him. He's been doing great work down there. That this is about a military base that we have down there in when it comes to Honduras. You know what I'm saying? We're involved in these countries heavily financially, militarily wise, corporate wise. We got to get the hell out. We got to stop interfering. What moral ground do we have to stand on if we don't recognize the fact that our involvement causes a lot of these problems? excluding Russia today, we talked about Venezuela. We talked about, what was the second one we talked about, John?
China.
China. Okay, these countries were pouring tax dollar money in to pour gasoline on these fires.
Oh, and to be fair about China, there are a lot of organic protesters.
Absolutely.
But they've been tricked by those paid leaders that are paid to incite protest, to incite violence, to incite an opposition to the government.
Yeah.
So that's something that we got to definitely recognize.
I'm going to leave it on that subject because I think you hit it beautifully there, my man. It's so true. Once again, they are organic, but we don't need to be pouring fuel on the fire, and we're pouring it on with taxpayer money. You want to talk about a couple videos before we get on out of here, right?
Yes, I want to let everyone know you should check out these videos here.
Check these out, fams.
So I don't know if y'all saw it, but Andrew Yang was pandering to Israel. You should check that out on our channel. And then the other one I want y'all to see, if you're definitely anti-war, then you need to see the one that is pinned on our YouTube, which is the...
You can play a little bit of it, right?
Yeah, I'll play a little bit of it. Hold on.
It's
Where
gone.
is it? Where
It's
is
disappeared. We made this great video, and it just hasn't been getting the play we thought it would get. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen.
Ah.
YouTube, they slow you down. It was about war. It's about the NED. It's about funding war. Rachel Brunke knows.
Hello, my name is Christian Guzman.
Hi, my name is Lisa Peterson.
But my name is Miguel Zuniga.
My name is Irena Barjabedian.
John Lackner.
And the idea is we're not anti-people who join the military. We're not anti-troop. We're actually in the peace movement, the ones who want to support our troops by bringing them home.
So I think it really comes down to this. I think everyone in the entire world, they want to have a good life for themselves. And they want to have a good life for their family. And I don't think that's going to happen if we keep killing each other.
So in 2018, our government spent like about $800 billion in spending of our money, and that that they borrowed elsewhere, where they only spent like maybe 180 something billion dollars for social services in our country.
All right, let them stop. Go ahead.
Our soldiers.
We have another super chat too as well to get to. But did you want to talk about anything else, my man? Is that's the war video we put up?
I want y'all to realize that in 2018, the budget for the Department of Defense was 54% of the budget. You guys see this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Where's education? 6.5% on education. Energy, 2.7%. Health and Human Services, 6.2%. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, dude. That's why these issues are so important, right?
I made this graph. Like, I went into Excel. I found the White House released budget plan, and I made this pie chart myself. And you guys can verify that, but this is what it is. Some people were asking who was Bernie's foreign policy advisor. It was Matt Duss.
Matt Duss. There is a super chat on the MCSE network, and it says, "Let's be real." And this is coming from Notary S. Let's be real. Bernie's foreign policy sucks. It's Cold Warrior stuff, meaning Cold War stuff, with China and Russia. Even Medea Benjamin called him out, using Tulsi as an example from the left, saying to avoid escalation, a containment and no Cold War. Containment, no Cold War. I mean, this is what it's all about. And I'm telling you, his foreign policy has been slipping, and he needs to get a hold of it. And I think it's the people he's surrounding himself. Matt Duss needs to go. And just to say something too said on our thing before we send some shout-outs, he's not losing the progressive vote. I'm not saying he's losing the progressive vote. I'm saying that he's not getting enough libertarian and independent votes who understand foreign policy to get him over the top to beat Donald Trump. If it comes down to it, he's throwing it away, and this is where it's being lost. There's Democrats that are going to vote for him no matter what, and there's Republicans that won't vote for him no matter what. It's that middle ground, and a lot of people understand that when you spend the chart that Johnny just put up, when you're spending all your money on war, you don't have any money for Medicare for all. You don't have any money for free education. If we're going to stay in this monetary system, you don't have any money if you're wasting it on war. So when you're not calling out America's intervention through the way of the NGOs and the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, which is anything but, then you're failing, and the libertarians know this. All you have to do, progressives, if you want to know more about libertarian intervention, where the libertarians call this stuff out, anti-war, go to the Ron Paul Institute. They're ahead of this stuff. Late June, they were saying, whoa, 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 China, don't fall for it. Yeah, there's some organic protests, but they're fueling this stuff, and the next thing you know, they're moving battleships into the South China Sea. Jimmy Lai, his name was one of the big intel guys in Hong Kong, hates Beijing. They funneled a lot of money through Jimmy Lai. They got a picture of John Bolton and Jimmy Lai, Nancy Pelosi and Jimmy Lai. This is taxpayer dollar, and if you don't eliminate it and you don't recognize it, you tend to lose. And Bernie, you need to get your shit together and get rid of this guy, Matt Duss. He's cancerous. And we got to keep an eye on Faiz when it comes to foreign policy, because he should stay out of it, because he stinks as well. You don't pander to somebody for votes that you would have gotten anyways. If you want to make a statement and say there's some atrocities going on, and I said this before, the atrocities that occurred during the blackout are nothing, are small, are tiny, are an eyelash hair compared to the sanctions that will kill young, poor, innocent kids in Venezuela. Get on it, Bernie. To hell with Jack Ryan. We want to thank some people on our Convo Couch YouTube, Mike Fagan, Donnie Newman. You know, let go of the booze, Michael Cruz. He's always there, my boy. I love him. Paul, we love you. David Massell, Fluffy Bunny, Donnie Newman, SN, Gloria Aquino. There's 150 people watching on a Saturday. Thank you so much. You got anybody on the Facebook to say hi to?
I want to say to Paul BSO Gaming that we're not anti-Bernie. We're just criticizing. We can criticize Bernie about his foreign policy.
There you go.
He should get rid of his advisor, and he should just really just take notes from Tulsi, who's the best on foreign policy.
You know, Johnny, you say some good stuff today. I'm telling you, man. It's the truth. Why can't we criticize this guy? Are we supposed to just praise him no matter what? Don't we run the risk of being hypocritical and losing a lot of independent and libertarian votes?
Yeah, and we criticize Tulsi when she needs to be criticized as well.
Yeah. Steve Wilbrandt, we love you. Miguel Zuniga is a force here in Southern California. You better believe he is. Fiorella Isabella, our lovely partner, is watching. Gabriel Ramirez, we love you. Eric Weinstein, keep sending me all that stuff. Jason Rodriguez, hello on the Facebooks. Roshan, hi Roshan, we love you, Roshan. You're the man. He probably is not watching.
It's Roshan.
Roshan, he's probably not watching because he didn't see Fiorella and he said, the hell with you, Pasta. Michiko, we love you. Sarah, what's up? Allison Irwin, thank you so much, everybody. Everybody who can help out and everybody who has helped out on the Patreon. We were up to 62 Patreons. Thank you so much for your support. We are so endeared by it. And the more you give us and the more you help us, the more we put into play. We never waste your money. Go ahead and check out that peace video. Johnny did some amazing work. It was some great footage because it's all about peace. Rachel Brunke says, our foreign policy directly affects our domestic policy at home. We can't have nice, Johnny, if we're spending it all on war. You got anything else for us?
No, that's it.
We're going to end the show up over here. Johnny's got to get to work. I got the Mets to watch, and then later on the Miami Hurricanes. Breaking news, Antonio Brown has been cut by the Raiders. So fantasy football players, that stinks for you. It stinks for me, for at least one team. For Johnny Tsunami and Pasta Jardula, thank you for watching the Convo Couch. Like, share, subscribe. Help us out on Patreon if you can. Convo out.